This is a bustling city, and this is a 1,000-foot tall tsunami that will ruin everything. And today we are going to be testing 3 different ways to stop it. First with large buildings, second with canals and flood walls, and third by terraforming the landscape. So let us begin. First, I'm going to start with like a line of buildings right here just to see how well it does against the water. So now that the buildings are in place, let's see if the city will survive. When the water hits the tall buildings, some of the water bounces away, but the rest continues to wipe out the rest of the city. Now let's try with even more. Now that we have 100 buildings, let's see if the city is protected. In no time, the water gets through the buildings. However, behind the buildings, the water level is much lower than over here, but over time, most of the city eventually gets destroyed. So we just gotta... Well, that is 3 hours that I'm never getting back. But we still have to see if all of these 1,000 buildings is enough to prevent the city from getting destroyed. When the tsunami crashes against the first 5 rows, it does manage to demolish a few buildings, but by row 8 through 10, the tsunami has been reduced to about the size of a puddle, and the city completely untouched. Now that we know the buildings can stop the tsunami, let's move on to canals and flood walls. First, let's just try 5 canals to see if they even do anything. So that didn't seem to work, so maybe if we try canals and flood walls, we might get a better result. When testing the alternating pattern, it seems as if adding the walls didn't even do anything. I think the canals are the way to go, and I'm curious what happens if we fill the whole area with them. Now that we filled the entire zone with canals, all we gotta do is test to see if 40 canals can save a city from the tsunami. Halfway through, it almost seems like the tsunami has died down slightly, but as the tsunami gets closer towards the city, we can start to see that the city is doomed. And in the end, only a few buildings survived. So since the canals didn't work, maybe let's try to put a bunch of flood walls up and give them a second chance. Now that we have 35 flood walls, it's time to see if the city would survive. As you can see, like the canals, the flood walls don't seem to be doing much. And actually, they seem to be doing worse because not a single building from the city survives. There's one more thing I want to do with the canals and flood walls, which is to try to alternate them again. Reason being is that a bunch of water might get trapped between them on a large scale and would hopefully diminish the tsunami over time. But there is only one way to find out, and that is to test it. As you see here, I already gone ahead and laid out the flood walls and canals, and we just have to wait for the water to pass over everything. Okay, so now it's at the city, and actually the flood walls plus the canals did way better than either of them on their own. For the canals and flood walls, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Now let's try terraforming. The first test will be with the medium wall, the second test will be with the high wall, and the third test will be with the mega wall. But let's go back to the medium wall. As the tsunami crashed into the side of it, the waves sloshed over the medium wall and continued for the city. Just imagine how terrifying it would be to be standing right there and a massive wave coming right at you. As for the city itself, only 2 buildings survived, so I'll give it a 0 out of 10. Now let's try with the large wall. This time when the tsunami crashed into it, most of the water got deflected back into the ocean. However, a good portion of the water managed to make it over the wall. Using the large wall, only 50% of the buildings managed to survive, so I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Now it's time for the mega wall. It's multiple times the height of the tsunami, so surely it would stop the water. As the water hits it, it seems to just phase right through it. I think it's because the wall is too thin, so I'll make it thicker and maybe we'll try again. After a few tests and making it 4 times as thick as the first one, the water still seems to get through and the wall seems to be almost as effective as the large wall. Because of that, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10 because it didn't meet my expectations. Now that we tried walls, maybe we can stop the tsunami by making a giant trench in the ground. I already went ahead and made a 1 wide trench that goes all the way down as far as the game would let me, so let's give it a shot and see if it would protect the city. As the tsunami went over the trench, a surprising amount of water got trapped in it, and as it passed over the city, it did way less damage than any of the walls in the past. Honestly, I'll give it a 6 out of 10 because I was not expecting it to work that well. Now let's try with a 2 wide trench. As the water passed over it, nearly the entire tsunami got trapped in the trench, and although some of the water splashed out onto the roads of the city, I'm still very impressed that none of the buildings got destroyed. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm gonna call that a win for terraforming. That is all for this video. Make sure you check out these videos and subscribe.